The banking system is on the brink of collapse.
The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank.
Insure against some sort of default in Credit Suisse.
The Fed, the Treasury, step in to provide bailouts.
All depositors with money at Silicon Valley Bank will be made whole.
So is the crisis over? Not even close. In fact, I would argue the crisis has just begun. I'm going to explain why in 3 simple, fast steps. Step number 1, let's go over WTF went wrong. And it's actually very simple. I don't want to name any names. We want to keep things anonymous. So we'll start off by comparing 2 banks. And you don't know who they are. The first bank is called Stupid Valley Bank, or SVB.
No idea.
But SVB really only had one depositor. And in this case, it was this person, because I don't know their gender. In fact, they are non-binary from what I have been told. And this person's name is Pot App Pat. And Pat just created an app to discover where you can buy the best weed. Oh, yes. And their claim to fame is that this app is going to change the world. So they're holding a sign that says, I love ESG, trans rights, and Antifa. Wow, good for them. In fact, they love these causes so much that they allocate almost 100% of their time trying to figure out how many genders there are. And they allocate 0% of their time actually protecting their working capital. You see, Pat has $1 million on deposit with Stupid Valley Bank, and it's $750,000 over the FDIC limit. So Pat, if they were actually paying attention, they would have taken that $750 and done something with it, such as put it into another bank, or put it into a money market fund, or heaven forbid, just put it into short-term T-bills. But Pat did none of those things because he was too worried about where the next Antifa rally was going to be held. So let's go ahead and look at the balance sheet of SVB. They've got $1 million in assets that consists of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, and this $1 million deposit from Pat. Okay, well, let's just assume for a moment that interest rates, as illustrated by this red line, go up. All right, well, that means that the cash position of the bank goes down. Why? Because there's an inverse relationship between interest rates and the price that you can sell a specific bond at. So if treasuries were purchased at a 1% interest rate, if interest rates go up to 5%, the price of those treasuries goes down. So let's just assume for a moment that Pot App isn't doing so well. Who would have thought it isn't making any money? So Pat has to draw down this $1 million. He has to spend it, of course, on payroll and rent and all these real world things. So in banking lingo, that means the deposits are leaving the bank and going to another bank. Well, if the deposits are leaving, the liabilities, that means the assets would need to leave as well. But wait a minute. Let's go ahead and think this through. If SVB has to sell the assets on their balance sheet since interest rates have gone up, well, now they can't get $1 million. They can only get $750,000. So what does this mean? The bank is effectively bust. So they have to go over to Pat and say, yeah, Pat, you know how you had that $1 million in your account? Unfortunately, now we can only give you $750,000. The depositor takes a haircut. But now let's go ahead and contrast that to WRB, or Well-Run Bank. You see, they don't just have one customer. They have multiple customers. In fact, in this case, they have, looks like 8 average Joes. And the average Joe doesn't have $1 million in his deposit account. They have maybe 1,000, 5,000, maybe 100,000. But in this case, let's say the cumulative total for all the average Joes is the exact same, $1 million. Okay, and then the asset side of well-run banks' balance sheet is going to be identical, $1 million. But then interest rates go up. So you would assume that well-run bank would have the exact same problem, but you would be wrong. Why? Because well-run bank actually hedged out their interest rate risk. So imagine that. So what happens is, yes, it is true. The assets on their balance sheet went down in value to $750,000 and they owe $1 million. But the hedges actually go up in value as the interest rates go up that are causing the value of the bonds to go down. So in this case, it is no problem. They're not even close to bust because they still have the $1 million as assets on their balance sheet and they have the $1 million in liabilities. Now what I want to do is go ahead and smash some financial fake news. I've been hearing this on Twitter and CNBC. People like Bill Ackman saying the only reason that stupid Valley Bank, we won't name any names, went out of business is because of social media, or all these VCs just called up their clients and said, hey, you need to take your money out of the bank. And it was just a good old-fashioned bank run. It was no fault whatsoever from SVB because they were actually a WRB, a very well-run bank. That is completely and utterly false. The reason the banks that went out of business went bust is simply because they didn't manage their balance sheet. They were asleep at the wheel. They didn't manage the assets, nor did they manage the liabilities. And this isn't difficult. In fact, to show you how easy this is, let's go to a clip from a recent episode of the Forward Guidance podcast, where they interview my good buddy, Joseph Wang, who used to work at the Federal Reserve, and Stephen Moran, who used to work at the Treasury. Editor, let's cut to the clip.
You know, like a summer intern wouldn't make those mistakes. It's shockingly stupid. And Silicon Valley Bank may have been unique in that type of stupidity, but there were other types of stupidity out there also. And confidence is confidence is a funny thing. It's difficult to win and easy to lose.
So there you go. Something so simple that it could have been handled by a summer intern. So if any of you out there are thinking about starting your own bank and wondering how not to go bust, let me give you some tips. Well, the asset side of your balance sheet, go ahead and throw in some hedges. Why don't you? Every once in a while. And then with the liabilities, if you've got all of this quote unquote hot money, meaning money that's above and beyond the FDIC insured $250,000, make sure you diversify those deposits with other depositors that fall under the $250,000 from FDIC. Why? Because those smaller depositors are far less likely to take their money and run or spend their money because they're going bust because they got caught up in the tech bubble. So the bottom line is, if you're managing your balance sheet well, you should never be susceptible to a quote unquote bank run. But I want to be very clear. The issues that we are having right now go far above and beyond just the banking system. In fact, these are issues that we haven't seen since 1987. More on that at the end of this video. Step number 2. Now let's go over the details of the bailouts. In fact, let's go ahead and start this step by smashing some more financial fake news with our good friend Bill Ackman. And if you don't know who Bill Ackman is, he's the hedge fund manager that Carl Icahn made look like a little bitch on CNBC, to put it mildly.
I really sort of had it with this guy Ackman. He's like the crybaby in the schoolyard.
Andy's the one that went back on CNBC during the cerveza sickness and started crying, quite literally, for bailouts.
He's not saying, he's not saying to storm the beaches.
So now the Bill Ackman types are coming out and commenting on these bailouts, saying, oh, well, they're not going to be funded by the taxpayer. Okay, well, let's dive into the details and see if that is true. So we start by categorizing the two types of bailouts we've seen by depositor bailouts and then the Fed and the government just flat out bailing out all the other banks that did the stupid things that stupid Valley Bank did. Well, the depositors, we start with the banks, the FDIC, and the average Joe. So it is true, the FDIC is private insurance. This is not government insurance, but the banks pay into the FDIC. I wonder where those banks get the money to pay the FDIC. Oh, that's right, from their depositors, like the average Joe. So what's happening now is the FDIC is growing in size, and they're going to go ahead and bail out Pot App Pat. But in order to bail Pot App Pat out, they have to charge the banks more for the FDIC insurance. Okay, so what are the banks going to do? They're just going to charge the average Joe even more than they were charging him before. So obviously, if we're being intellectually honest, Pat is being bailed out by the average Joe, i.e. the taxpayer. Oh, but wait, there is more. Let's go over to the bank bailouts and see how those worked to determine if they were funded by the taxpayer. So the government and the Fed came together with this brilliant facility called the BTFP, not to be confused with everybody's favorite facility, MILF, that they came up with during the cerveza sickness. So the Bank Term Funding Program is technically a separate entity from the government, your drunk, insolvent Uncle Sam, and the Federal Reserve. Okay, so how is this separate entity funded? Well, that's where the Treasury comes in. They're funding it with $25 billion. But what happens if they take a loss? What happens if the stupid Valley Bank 2.0 or 3.0 or 4.0 doesn't pay them back? Who takes the haircut? Oh, well, that would be the Treasury, meaning the government, meaning the taxpayer. So what happens is they put up the initial capital, the Fed buys the assets by putting up the bank reserves, and if there's any loss, as you can see here, it's not absorbed by the Fed, it's absorbed by the average Joe. You can see here he's even more pissed off than he was over there because he knows that over here he bailed out Pat, and over here he's having to bail out SVB Bank 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and what will most likely be SVB Bank Infinity. So I know a lot of you that are watching this video that are really paying attention are saying to yourself, well, George, I know the government, your drunk, insolvent Uncle Sam, is completely broke. So where on earth are they even getting the $25 billion to begin with? This is where the story gets really good. So they're pulling it out of the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Oh, yes. You say, well, what is that? That's basically the United States FX reserves, which were around $60 billion. Well, now you've got to subtract $25 billion from that. So let's call it 35. And you may be saying, okay, well, George, $60 billion or $35 billion even. I mean, that sounds like a lot. Okay, well, let's look at the fact that China has $3 trillion in FX reserves. So if we're at 60, that puts us right in line with Algeria. And then if we're down to 35, that puts us right on par with Uzbekistan. So the next question becomes, well, isn't that a security risk? Yeah, because we would use those FX reserves to prop up the dollar in case we got to a point where it was hyperinflating against other foreign currencies. I would definitely call that a security risk. So just go ahead and add this to the fact that the government has drawn down our strategic petroleum reserves. So now we have no oil in case of an emergency, nor do we have any cash in case of an emergency. What could possibly go wrong? And now you're starting to understand why I'm saying this is just the beginning of the crisis. Step number 3. Now let's go over something that just happened in markets. A huge red flag, canary in the coal mine that we haven't seen since Black Monday in 1987. Let's start by going over a chart of the 2-year Treasury yield. Now this only goes back a few days. On the left, we go from 4% up to 5%. So going into the weekend, interest rates on the 2-year Treasury right around 5%. But then what happens is they absolutely plummet to a point on Monday where they went from 5%, in fact, over 5%, to under 4%, a drop of over 100 basis points in just a few days.
The 2-year yield, which is, gosh, it was down 100 basis points over 3 or 4 sessions.
Something that, again, we haven't seen happen since Black Monday in 1987. So to give you some further context as to what the market is actually saying through this price action, let's go to 9/11, when terrorists literally took over a plane and flew it into the World Trade Center. Back then, what did the 2-year Treasury do? It went down by 68 basis points. So in the last few days, the 2-year Treasury has dropped almost 40 basis points more than it did during 9/11. So right about now, I'm sure you're asking yourself, okay, George, well, what does this mean? Let's go over that right now. What the market is telling us with this price action, and this is the key, that all the bailouts that we talked about in step number 2 won't work. Why? Because they don't address the real problem. You see, the Bill Ackman types come out and spread their financial fake news. In fact, more financial fake news by saying, oh, this is no problem. The Fed has this under control. They have the tools. In fact, Jerome Powell always comes out and assures us that we have the tools to fix this problem.
We have the tools to address those pressures. We will not hesitate to use them.
But then what do they do every single time we have a crisis? They say, oh, don't worry about it. We're going to go ahead and set up the PTFP. Remember the Bank Term Funding Program that is, oh, by the way, funded by the taxpayers through the Exchange Stabilization Fund. So what does that mean? They're setting up another tool. That's right. My good buddy Jeff Snyder points this out all the time, is they always come out and assure us that, oh, we have the tools to handle this problem. And every single time there's a problem, they say, oh, well, don't worry about it because we created another tool. Well, wait a minute here. I thought you already had the tools to handle all the problems. I guess not. So again, what this means is the Fed is completely reactionary. They're way behind the real problem because they don't even understand what the true problem is. And that's most likely that the global monetary system is broken, and it has been broken since 2008. So let's go down to a visual to make sure that we're making this crystal clear and everybody is on the same page. So right now, it's just like a volcano where all the scientists are out there saying, wait a minute, something's wrong. We've got some seismic activity here. We have this smoke coming out the top of the mountain or the volcano. And everyone is saying, oh, well, that's no big deal. Don't pay attention to those scientists. We'll go ahead and just put a cap. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll just put a cap over this mountain so then no more smoke will come out the top. Problem solved. We've got a tool for that. And of course, that smoke in seismic activity is Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, or the banks that went bust over the weekend. But as you know, just from using common sense, that little cap that they just put over the top of the mountain, that ain't going to fix the problem. Because what's really happening underneath the surface is something that the Fed and the central planners can't even see. And most likely, sometime in 2023, all of these economic pressures, the malinvestment, the misallocation of resources, the breakdown in the global monetary system is going to come to the surface where that financial crisis volcano explodes, just like we saw during 2008. And this is why I'm saying the crisis is just beginning. And it's not just me, some schmuck on YouTube, that's saying this. I'm just looking at the signals that are being given to us, and in fact, being screamed at us by the bond market and the massive inversion of the yield curve over the last 9 months plus, including what we have seen over the weekend, where the 2-year Treasury yield has gone down the most since Black Monday in 1987. For more content that'll help you build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big governments, check out this playlist. Right here, I will see you on the next video.